London is under siege by violence once again. A quiet neighborhood turned into a crime scene, a brutal stabbing, an injured police officer, and a community left in shock. What really happened on that fateful night in Elm Park? And more importantly, is anyone truly safe? The bass thumped. Laughter filled the air. A birthday party pulsed with life, oblivious to the horror about to unfold. Just after 10 p.m., the music stopped. Screams pierced the night. A gang of youths, their faces hidden by balaclavas, stormed the party. Armed with knives, they brought terror to the heart of this quiet community. This wasn't a robbery. The attack was swift and merciless. Partygoers scattered, desperate to escape the frenzy of flailing blades. Elm Park, a leafy suburb on the outskirts of London, had always been a haven of peace. Families strolled through its parks, children played in its streets, and neighbors chatted over garden fences. The rhythm of life was gentle, predictable, safe. But on this warm Saturday evening, that comforting rhythm was shattered. The residents of Elm Park, accustomed to the sounds of laughter and birdsong, were now confronted with the chilling echoes of violence. The attack sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents grappling with a disquieting question. Could this happen again? The usual bustle of weekend life seemed to fade, replaced by an unsettling stillness. The silence of the evening was ripped apart by the screech of tires. A group of uninvited guests, their faces contorted with rage, arrived at the birthday celebration. Witnesses described a scene of utter pandemonium. The calm of the summer evening was replaced by the blood-curdling screams of terrified partygoers. Friends frantically searched for friends. Neighbors peered nervously from behind curtains. 1 minute, Elm Park was a picture of suburban normality. The next, it was a battleground. The party, meant to be a celebration of life, was transformed into a desperate fight for survival. The birthday party was in full swing at a semi-detached house on Elm Park Avenue. Fairy lights twinkled, music blared, and the smell of barbecued burgers wafted through the air. Inside, laughter and chatter filled the house. The gang burst through the front door, a whirlwind of aggression and menace. Armed with an assortment of knives, they were a terrifying spectacle. Panic erupted, the festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a suffocating blanket of fear. And a group of friends huddled together in the corner of the living room, watched in terror as the chaos unfolded. Sarah, celebrating her 21st birthday, clung to her boyfriend Mark, her eyes wide with fear. The attackers moved with a chilling efficiency, their blades flashing in dim light. They seemed to know exactly who they were after, their movements purposeful amidst the chaos. One of the attackers, taller than the others and radiating an aura of cold authority, barked orders. Escape seemed impossible. The house, once filled with the warmth of celebration, was now a suffocating trap. The attack was brutal and swift, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. As quickly as it had begun, it was over. The gang melted back into the night, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the whimpers of the injured and the sobs of the traumatized. The living room floor, once a dance floor pulsating with life, was now a tapestry of broken glass, overturned furniture, and blood. The smell of blood hung heavy in the air. A grotesque perfume that permeated every corner of the house. The silence was broken by the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The attackers fanned out across the living room, their blades glinting under the disco ball's light. The once joyous atmosphere curdled into terror. The first swing of a knife slashed through the air, finding its mark in the arm of a young man who had been dancing moments before. His scream, a raw and primal sound, pierced the sudden silence that had descended upon the room. The music, abruptly cut off, left a ringing void quickly filled by the panicked gasps and desperate cries of the partygoers. The dance floor, moments ago a kaleidoscope of swirling bodies and joyous abandon, transformed into a scene of utter chaos. Friends clutched at each other, their eyes wide with terror as they desperately searched for an escape route. Instinct took over. The room, now a maelstrom of flailing limbs and desperate cries, became a battleground for survival. Some, paralyzed by fear, froze in place, their eyes wide with terror, while others, fueled by adrenaline, fought back with a ferocity born of desperation. Mark, Sarah's boyfriend, reacted instantly. Pushing Sarah behind him, he grabbed an empty beer bottle from a nearby table, the glass cold and slick in his trembling hand. He smashed the bottle against the edge of the table, the sharp sound momentarily cutting through the chaos, and brandished the jagged neck at the approaching attackers. His defiance, a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness, bought precious seconds. Sarah, still reeling from the shock of the initial attack, watched in horror as Mark confronted the attackers. Her world, once filled with the promise of a joyous birthday celebration, had been reduced to this, a terrifying struggle for survival. Time seemed to distort, stretching out into an eternity of fear and uncertainty. She felt a hand on her arm, a reassuring pressure in the chaos. "We have to get out of here," a voice whispered urgently, pulling her towards the back of the house. It was Lisa, her best friend, her face pale but determined. They scrambled to their feet, their legs shaky beneath them, and stumbled towards the kitchen. The silence of the night returned to Elm Park, but it was a silence pregnant with unease. The flashing blue and red lights of emergency vehicles cut through the darkness, casting long, dancing shadows on the neat hedges and manicured lawns. The remnants of the party, discarded balloons, a lone stiletto, a pool of congealing vomit, lay scattered on the pavement, a grim testament to the night's horrors. Neighbors, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity, gathered in hushed groups, their whispers punctuated by the distant wail of sirens. The news, spreading like wildfire through the close-knit community, had transformed Elm Park from a haven of tranquility into a hotbed of speculation and fear. "Did you hear? A gang of youths, they say," whispered one woman, clutching her dressing gown tightly around her. Armed with knives they were. The following day, the residents of Elm Park awoke to a changed world. The events of the previous night, still raw and shocking, dominated conversations. The local news, filled with images of the crime scene and interviews with shell-shocked residents, only served to amplify the sense of unease that had settled over the community. It was like a horror film. A young woman, her arm in a sling, her face still bearing the marks of the previous night's terror, told a reporter, "They just came out of nowhere. One minute we were dancing, the next it was like all hell broke loose." The attack had shaken the community to its core, leaving many questioning their sense of safety and security. The physical scars of the attack, the blood stains on the pavement, the boarded up windows of the house where the party had been held, were a constant reminder of the violence that had visited Elm Park. But it was the invisible scars, the psychological wounds inflicted on the victims and the community as a whole, that ran deeper and would take longer to heal. Sarah, her 21st birthday forever tainted by the events of that night, found herself struggling to cope with the emotional fallout. The carefree joy she had felt just hours before the attack seemed like a distant memory. Now she was plagued by nightmares, flashbacks, and a constant gnawing anxiety. I keep replaying that night in my head. She confided in her mother, her voice barely a whisper. The attack had left an indelible mark on Elm Park, a stark reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic of communities, darkness could lurk just beneath the surface. The silence of the aftermath was shattered by the shrill cry of sirens. A wave of blue lights flooded Elm Park Avenue, their strobes painting the suburban street in an eerie, flickering glow. Police cars, their tires spitting gravel, screeched to a halt outside the house. Their arrival, a stark counterpoint to the carnage that had unfolded just moments before. Officers, their faces grim, fanned out across the property, their movements swift and practiced. The rhythmic thud of boots on pavement echoed in the night air, a reassuring presence amidst the chaos. A cordon was quickly established, the yellow tape a stark demarcation between the normality of suburban life and the horror that had invaded it. Paramedics, their faces etched with a combination of urgency and grim determination, rushed into the house, their green bags held tight. Detective Inspector Sarah Jones pushed through the throng of officers and paramedics. The air, thick with the smell of blood and fear, did little to dampen her resolve. "What do we have?" she barked, her voice sharp and commanding. "Multiple stabbings, ma'am," the constable replied. They were masked, the attackers. Came in fast, did their worst, and then disappeared. "They won't get away with this," she muttered. "We will find them." As dawn broke over Elm Park, the community struggled to come to terms with the violence that shattered their peace. The attack dominated headlines, searing the crime scene into the city's consciousness. Reporters descended, thrusting microphones into the faces of shell-shocked residents. Candlelit vigils were held, messages of support scrawled on pavements. Parents walked their children to school, eyes scanning the streets. Neighbors now eyed each other with suspicion and unease. Elm Park bore an invisible scar, requiring time and collective effort to heal. The events in Elm Park reverberated far beyond the neat hedges and manicured lawns of that quiet suburban street. The attack, a brutal reminder of the undercurrent of violence that could surface in even the most seemingly peaceful communities, sparked a citywide conversation about knife crime, youth violence, and the complex social issues that fueled them. Newspapers, their front pages dominated by images of the blood-stained pavement and the shocked faces of Elm Park residents, ran editorials decrying the rise of lawlessness and demanding tougher action from the authorities. Politicians, sensing an opportunity to capitalize on the public's fear, engaged in a familiar dance of finger-pointing and empty promises. The attack became a lightning rod for a city grappling with a complex and multifaceted problem. It forced Londoners to confront the uncomfortable reality that knife crime, once largely confined to the shadows of deprived inner city neighborhoods, was now casting a long shadow across the entire city. The attack on the birthday party in Elm Park was not an isolated incident. It was a stark and brutal reminder that the city, for all its vibrancy and diversity, was also a place where violence could erupt suddenly and without warning, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and a community grappling with the aftermath. The Elm Park stabbing was a story repeated with alarming regularity across the capital. Statistics painted a grim picture. Knife crime was on the rise, with young people disproportionately represented among both victims and perpetrators. The reasons behind this surge in violence were complex, a tangled web of social deprivation, gang culture, poverty, and a lack of opportunities. Experts pointed to a toxic cocktail of factors: the glamorization of violence in certain sections of popular culture, the easy availability of knives, and the breakdown of traditional support structures like families and communities. The result was a generation of young people growing up with a sense of hopelessness, their lives devoid of opportunity, their futures bleak and uncertain. For these young people, often failed by the education system, neglected by society, and lured in by the false promises of gang life, carrying a knife was not a choice but a necessity. It was a twisted symbol of power, a defense mechanism in a world where violence was often the only language they understood. The Elm Park attack, although shocking in its brutality, was just one symptom of a much deeper malaise afflicting the city. It was a wake-up call, a stark reminder that London, for all its wealth and grandeur, was also a city grappling with deep-seated social problems that could no longer be ignored. In the wake of the Elm Park stabbing, a palpable sense of anxiety settled over London. The city, once renowned for its tolerance, seemed to be teetering on edge. Parents, their fears amplified by the relentless news cycle, became increasingly reluctant to let their children out of their sight. Parks and playgrounds, once filled with the joyous sounds of laughter and play, seemed eerily quiet. The attack had struck a nerve, exposing a raw undercurrent of fear that ran through the city. It was a fear that transcended social class, ethnicity, and postcode. It was the fear of random violence, of losing control, of the thin veneer of civilization being stripped away to reveal the primal instincts that lurk beneath. The city authorities, under pressure to be seen to be doing something, responded with a familiar mix of knee-jerk reactions and long-term strategies. Police patrols were stepped up, stop and search powers were increased, and funding was pledged for youth outreach programs. But these measures, while well-intentioned, felt like sticking plasters on a gaping wound. The root causes of knife crime, poverty, inequality, lack of opportunity, were complex and deeply entrenched, requiring a sustained and multifaceted approach that went far beyond law enforcement. The challenge facing London was not just how to reduce knife crime, but how to create a society where young people felt valued, where they had a stake in the future, and where violence was no longer seen as a viable option. It was a challenge that would require a collective effort from all levels of society, a commitment to addressing the root causes of violence, and a willingness to invest in the future of the city's young people. The events in Elm Park left an indelible mark on London's psyche, a birthday party transformed into a battleground, a chilling reminder of peace's fragility. Echoes of screams, bloodstained pavements, and palpable fear lingered long after the sirens faded. London wrestled with an uncomfortable truth. Violence could stretch far beyond dimly lit alleys and underprivileged neighborhoods. It could pierce the heart of a seemingly idyllic suburb, shattering the illusion of safety. The attack in Elm Park was not just about a single night of violence, it was a stark reflection of a city grappling with its own internal demons. It brought to the fore the uncomfortable realities of knife crime and gang culture. It served as a wake-up call, urging Londoners to confront the uncomfortable truths beneath. In the aftermath of the Elm Park attack, a city found itself suspended between hope and fear. The fear was palpable, in the tightened grip of parents holding their children's hands a little tighter, in the wary glances exchanged between strangers on once familiar streets, in the hushed whispers that replaced casual conversations. The sense of vulnerability, of the ever-present potential for chaos to erupt, permeated the air like a chilling breeze. Yet amidst the fear, there were also glimmers of hope. The community of Elm Park, though wounded, showed remarkable resilience. They came together in vigils and fundraisers, offering support to the victims and their families, demonstrating that even in the face of such darkness, the human spirit could endure. Across London, the incident sparked conversations, ignited debates, and fueled a renewed determination to address the root causes of youth violence. Community leaders, politicians, and concerned citizens alike grappled with finding solutions, acknowledging that the path to healing required more than just increased police presence or tougher sentencing. It demanded a holistic approach, tackling poverty, investing in education and opportunity, providing young people with a sense of belonging and purpose. The road to recovery for Elm Park, and indeed for London as a whole, would be long and arduous. The scars of that night, both visible and invisible, would take time to heal. The challenge lay in transforming the memory of violence into a catalyst for positive change, reclaiming the streets, the parks, the very soul of the community from fear, fostering an environment where young people felt valued, heard, and empowered, addressing social and economic disparities, creating a stronger, more resilient community, building a London where every young person can thrive. The journey would be fraught with challenges, but the spirit of resilience and hope offered a glimmer of light. The fight for Elm Park, for London, was a fight for the future. A future where every street corner resonated with laughter. Elm Park is just one of many areas affected by rising violence. And if a police officer can be injured in the line of duty, what does that say about the safety of the rest of us? Something needs to change. More policing, tougher laws, a crackdown on knives. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, staying informed is your first defense in an unpredictable world. Thanks for staying tuned. Like, share, and subscribe for the latest news.